Miyamoto Musashi fought his first duel at the age of 13. He killed his opponent. By the time he was 30, he had fought over 60 duels and never lost a single one. He did not lose because he was the strongest, the fastest, or the most technically gifted swordsman in Japan. He won because he understood something that most of his opponents did not, that the outcome of a fight is determined not just by the sharpness of the blade, but by the clarity of the mind holding it. When Musashi finally retired from dueling, he did not write a manual of sword techniques. He wrote a manual of perception, strategy, and the nature of mastery itself. He called it the Book of Five Rings. He wrote it at 60 years old, alone in a cave, knowing he was dying. He had spent the last decades of his life not fighting, but studying, painting, sculpting, practicing calligraphy, immersing himself in Zen Buddhism and the classical arts of Japan. He believed that the principles governing excellence in one discipline were the same principles governing excellence in all of them. A swordsman and a carpenter were operating from the same deep logic. A general and a poet were drawing from the same well. The way, as he called it, was singular. Only the surface changed. That belief is what makes the Book of Five Rings so strange and so enduring. It is simultaneously a combat manual and a philosophy of life, a book about killing people that turns out to be, at its core, a book about how to think, how to perceive, and how to become genuinely excellent at whatever it is you have chosen to do. Here are 4 of its most essential lessons, translated from the dojo into the terrain of modern life. Musashi opens with a principle that sounds simple until you actually sit with it: you must study the way of strategy relentlessly. Not casually. Not occasionally. Relentlessly, with the kind of total commitment that transforms technique from something you do into something you are. He describes the ideal swordsman not as someone who thinks about the right move in the heat of battle, but as someone who has practiced so deeply that the right move emerges without thought. The mind is clear. The body acts. There is no gap between perception and response. This state, which Zen calls mushin, or no mind, is not mystical. It is the neurological endpoint of mastery. When you practice something deeply enough, the decision-making moves from the slow, conscious, deliberate part of your brain to the faster, automatic, instinctive part. The chess grandmaster who sees the winning move instantly. The jazz musician who improvises fluently without stopping to think about scales. The athlete who makes the right read in a fraction of a second. None of them are thinking in the conventional sense. They have practiced past the point where thinking is necessary. Most people never get there because they stop practicing before they cross that threshold. They reach a level of competence that feels sufficient and then plateau, mistaking familiarity with mastery. Musashi had no patience for this. He believed that halfway was worse than not starting at all, because the person who stops at competence has lost the hunger that drove them forward while gaining a false confidence that prevents them from seeing how far they still have to go. The actionable demand here is to identify the one skill at the center of your craft, not the peripheral skills, not the supporting capabilities, but the one thing that everything else depends on, and then commit to practicing it past the point of comfort, past the point of good enough, past the point where you have to think about it, until it becomes reflex. That depth of practice does not happen in sessions of convenient length. It happens in the hours after you would normally stop, in the repetitions that feel unnecessary because you already did it right, in the quiet sustained commitment that most people abandon because no one is watching. One of Musashi's most famous instructions to his students concerns the gaze. He distinguishes between 2 kinds of looking: ken, the ordinary eye that focuses on a specific point, and kan, the perceiving eye that takes in everything without fixing on anything. In combat, he writes, the warrior must use the perceiving eye, looking broadly at the scene, registering the whole rather than locking onto any one detail. The swordsman who stares at his opponent's blade will miss the shift in his feet. The one who fixes on the eyes will miss the rotation of the shoulder. Total awareness requires a kind of deliberate unfocusing, a willingness to receive the whole picture rather than interrogate one piece of it. This is one of the most sophisticated perceptual instructions in all of martial literature, and its translation into daily life is immediate and profound. Most people move through their work, their conversations, and their decisions with the equivalent of tunnel vision, fixated on the immediate, the obvious, the loudest signal in the room. They see the detail in front of them clearly while missing the larger pattern that gives that detail its meaning. The manager who focuses obsessively on this quarter's numbers while missing the cultural erosion that will make next year's numbers catastrophic. The person in a conversation so focused on what they plan to say next that they miss what is actually being communicated. The entrepreneur so locked onto their original vision that they cannot see the market shifting beneath them. Developing the perceiving eye in your own life means training yourself to regularly zoom out. When you are deep in the detail of a problem, build in the habit of pulling back and asking what the broader picture looks like. In conversations, practice listening not just to the words but to what is underneath them, the tone, the hesitation, the things being carefully avoided. In your work, develop the discipline of looking at the system, not just the task. One concrete practice: at the end of each day, spend 5 minutes asking yourself what you noticed that you did not act on. Not what you did, what you observed. Over time, this builds the habit of broad perception that Musashi considered inseparable from genuine strategic intelligence. You cannot respond to what you cannot see. Train yourself to see more. Musashi is obsessed with rhythm, and the depth of his thinking on the subject goes far beyond what most readers initially absorb. He writes that everything has rhythm: the rise and fall of businesses, the arc of careers, the momentum of relationships, the flow of a fight. The master strategist learns to read the rhythm of whatever they are engaged in and to act either in harmony with it when that serves their purpose, or in deliberate disruption of it when that does not. He teaches that one of the most powerful moves available is to break your opponent's rhythm at the moment they are most committed to it, to introduce unexpected timing, unexpected pace, unexpected silence where they anticipated sound. The modern application of this principle is wide and largely unexplored. Every negotiation has a rhythm, and the person who controls the tempo controls the outcome. Every creative project has a rhythm, and the artist who can feel when to accelerate and when to pause produces work with a pulse that purely mechanical production never achieves. Every conversation has a rhythm, and the communicator who understands this, who knows when to slow down just as the other person expects speed, when to be direct just as they expect hedging, operates on a different level of effectiveness than one who simply reacts to whatever pace is already established. The first step in applying this lesson is to become conscious of rhythm where you previously took it for granted. In your next high-stakes conversation or negotiation, pay attention to the tempo, who is setting it, whether it serves you, and what would happen if you deliberately altered it. In your creative work, notice when you are working at a pace that is habitual rather than intentional, and experiment with deliberately changing it. In your daily schedule, identify where you are locked into a rhythm that no longer serves your actual priorities and ask what it would take to disrupt it. Musashi would tell you that the person who can operate comfortably outside the expected rhythm, who is not rattled when conditions shift, and who can introduce that shift deliberately when it benefits them, holds a structural advantage over almost everyone they encounter. There is a passage near the end of the Book of Five Rings that is so direct it reads almost like Musashi losing his patience. He writes that you should not copy other people's techniques or try to impress others with your ability. The way of strategy, he insists, is found through genuine personal inquiry, through your own practice, your own observation, your own relentless testing of what actually works against the reality in front of you. Not through imitation. Not through performance. Not through the accumulation of techniques borrowed from others because they looked impressive or carried the right reputation. This cuts against one of the deepest instincts in any competitive environment. When we see someone succeed, we want to do what they did. When a method becomes fashionable, we adopt it. When an authority endorses an approach, we defer. These instincts are not entirely wrong. There is real wisdom in learning from those who have gone before you. But Musashi is warning against something more corrosive, the substitution of imitation for understanding. The person who copies a technique without understanding its underlying logic will deploy it in situations where it does not apply. The person who builds their approach entirely from borrowed methods will always be one step behind, reactive, dependent on others to show them what to do next. They will never develop the deep independent judgment that genuine mastery requires. What Musashi is demanding is the harder path of first principles thinking, going back to the fundamental reality of your craft and asking what is actually true, regardless of what is fashionable, regardless of what the successful people around you are doing, regardless of what you have been told. This does not mean ignoring wisdom or refusing to learn from others. It means digesting what you learn until it becomes your own, testing it against reality until you understand not just what works but why it works, and developing the confidence that comes from genuine comprehension rather than borrowed technique. In practice, this means spending less time consuming what other people in your field are doing and more time in direct engagement with the fundamentals of your own craft. Read less about the work. Do the work. Fail with your own ideas. Learn from the failure. Develop the calluses that only come from direct contact with reality. That is the path Musashi walked. It is longer and lonelier than imitation. It is also the only path that leads to the kind of mastery that does not collapse when conditions change. Musashi died in 1645, a week after finishing the Book of Five Rings. He spent his final years not as a celebrated hero but as a solitary old man in a cave, writing by torchlight, trying to put into words something that he believed could not truly be transmitted through words, only through practice, only through direct experience, only through the long accumulation of hours spent in genuine engagement with your craft. That paradox sits at the heart of the book. Musashi knew that reading about the way was not the same as walking it. He knew that understanding these lessons intellectually was not the same as embodying them. He wrote them down anyway, not because he thought the words would be enough, but because he hoped they might point someone in the right direction. Toward relentless practice. Toward broader perception. Toward the mastery of rhythm. Toward the courage to pursue what is true rather than what is fashionable. He was 60 years old, dying alone in a cave, and he was still working. There is a lesson in that too. The way does not end. It only deepens.